Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
And good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you are tuning on or listening in the future. This is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth on KUNX Digital Broadcasting. And we're going to get right into the show. No monologue necessary today, except Happy April Fool's Day, if that's not some contradiction in terms. This evening's guest is my friend and colleague, Raymond Szymanski. He is a 4-decade U.S. government senior scientist turned paranormal researcher and author. Ray has devoted a good part of his investigative life to taking us inside the top secret holy grail of ufology, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, to look at previously unexplored alien visitation possibilities. His interest in extraterrestrials and their connection to Wright-Patt was ignited during his first week of government employment by a mentor who eventually earned promotion to the exclusive ranks of the Senior Executive Service. This intriguing backstory and many revelatory adventures are presented in Ray's investigations throughout the UFO ET phenomena narrative, transforming from a curious, skeptical researcher to a firm believer in the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Relying on decades of professional experience, Ray did his own research, investigating available facts and theories all the way to ground, trusting yet verifying. The result is an exclusive first-person adventure story described in a very fast-read narrative illustrated by never-before-published photos. Ray's books, before we get started, I wanted you to be aware, 50 Shades of Grays, Alien Shades of Grays, and Swamp Gas My Ass. I have to say, when I first encountered the book Swamp Gas My Ass, I thought, this can't be serious. No serious book would be named that. After reading the book, I realized it was deadly serious, and the book could not have had any other name. The purpose of this show was going to be an early promotion for one of the most awaited UFO conferences, I think, in American history, which would have been in September at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the first time ever anywhere that a UFO conference was held on and not near a military base. Ray's efforts on this were extraordinary and long-term. And what, again, I hoped we would be promoting, which laid out here with the speakers. I think it's actually a great poster as well. On Friday, turned around and became this. And with that understood, we're going to talk about what happened and then move on to other areas of UFO-related stuff. Without further ado then, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth, Ray Szymanski. Welcome back.
Thank you, Peter. It's really great to be back. And, I know I'm in a comfortable position here amongst friends. It should have been much better, as you said, but unfortunately, it is what it is. We have to face up to the fact. I like to think of it as something like Thomas Edison, where, every time he couldn't get the light bulb working, he just said it's one way that it didn't work. But I'm really not sure what the future of it is, but I think it's important for people to understand what the nature of that event was going to be,
Yeah. And
because it's
also,
really,
I just want to jump in for one moment for one
yes,
extraneous idiotic bit of information and turn it back to you. Years ago, I gave a talk in Dearborn, Michigan, the home center of the Ford empire. Henry Ford and Thomas Edison were good friends.
yes,
And in, I think, the early 1930s, the original Edison laboratory in New Jersey, it was just a big, funky series of wooden buildings, was slated to be torn down. And Ford, who had created this, it's not like Disneyland, but it's this sort of,
Dearborn, it's called Dearborn Village.
yeah, yeah. It's sort of his dream memory of, growing up before the Civil War and not so much recreating buildings, but finding buildings and bringing them in and, reestablishing them on new foundations. And I visited Edison's old lab. It was like, talk about holy grails, don't touch anything, stay in line, but everything is as it was. And one of the things the guide said, beside the fact that Edison needed no more than 3 hours sleep a night and often slept on a table using a bunch of books as a pillow, and that he kept notebooks full of very dirty jokes, that there were something like 600 attempts to create the filament. And
Actually,
you're right.
2000.
His attitude was extraordinary. It wasn't like, oh no, another defeat. It was, wow, one more thing that I know I can set aside and now move on to what ultimately will be the solution to the problem. Can you first tell us a little bit about where the genesis of this idea to have a UFO conference, not just at an American air base, but Wright-Patterson Air Force Base? And we'll talk about why that is so significant as we move on and how things developed before we
Well,
talk about how they fell apart.
sure. Let me just one up you on the Edison thing, because I made regular trips to Greenfield Village, and
Oh
uh,
gosh.
if you will remember, the clock that was on the wall in Edison's laboratory, it didn't have hands on it. It was just a piece of wood, and the reason a chopped piece of wood. And he said, I measure time in productivity, not in hours. So anyway, that was my takeaway from Edison.
Yeah.
All right, back to this conference. We're just all tiptoeing around it. Um, this is 2024. So in early 2023, I get contacted by a local business guy whom I didn't know. And he said, I just failed to get a UFO conference at Wright-Patterson, and we want to push it off several months. And I talked to my friends at the Fairborn, which is the local city that abuts Wright-Patterson. I talked to the historical people, and you've briefed them a couple times, which I did. And we always had great people show up, a couple hundred. So he said, they told me that you're the guy that can help us. We meet at a Waffle House. They have, coffee, and he's got a group of about 8 people. His wife's there, who's co-owner of his business, and these are all prominent people. They're retired doctors, lawyers. He's got a really good group, and they're thinking about how to make this thing happen. So that's early 2023, and I look back at how they failed the first time, because you got to do a little autopsy there to see, well,
Yes.
did you know what you were doing? Did you have the right people? Well, it turns out that they had hired a lady who had a large following on a paranormal show. And when they found her, she's an Ohio-based person, and she said, "Oh, I know all those speakers, so I'll get you a great lineup, and I'll make it happen. I'll sell enough tickets, and you guys will just be solvent, no problem." Apparently, what happened is we're going to call him Bill. He's the business guy that invited me out for this first meeting. He did not have any restrictions placed upon the person who was going to organize the event for him. And so she got big names, guys like James Fox, as an example. And then she gave him the bill for it. And she had actually offered to pay these people honorariums between $5,000 and $7,000 each. So she was clueless. He was even more clueless. And he said, well, yeah, when I asked her, what's it going to cost me? Just for the honorariums, it was like $40,000. Had nothing. They haven't even talked about hotel rooms or transportation. So he said, well, look I've got enough money in my kitty to cover some of this. Why don't you sell tickets? So they wound up being far, far, far short. And he just decided to pull the plug, fire her, and bid a fond adieu. So that's when he calls me in, and I look at this and I go, well, some of the problems are obvious, but to me, what was obvious is they had no idea what they were doing. To just throw this in somebody's lap and say, organize it, and yeah, we're going to set it up at this venue, just proved they didn't know what they were doing. So I thought, okay, what do you want to do now? He says, well, we're going to take this 2-day event, and one, we want you to be a speaker, and we want you to offer some of the people that you might know who were the original speakers, and contact them and see if maybe, they can come back and it'll be a little bit more reasonable financially. So, immediately they go from like 8 speakers to 3 speakers, and so maybe 4 speakers. So I redug some of that ground, and a couple of the folks went, hey dude, he offered me $5,000. I'm not coming in for any less than $5,000. And I said, well, hey dude, you're now uninvited. You've just uninvited yourself. And then James, he was too busy and maybe in shell shock because, he was going to get 10%. And I love the guy, and he had to make a business decision. He just said, well, get back to me in a couple months. So I looked it all over, and they asked me to put an ad out just as a feeler. So I did a Facebook thing, and the response was, there was no ticket sales set up. The response was lukewarm. And I looked at it, I said, you're going to need a full year, because they were trying to like reboot this thing in 2 months.
No, never work.
Yeah. So I said, it was now like June or July, and we weren't going to do anything that's of 2023 until September of 2024. And I said, we have enough time. So in the interim, so John and Bill were the 2 guys who dreamed this up. And John he runs a major retail store. He is the big manager. So he's got organizational skills. He actually was in the hotel business, doing conferences and that sort of thing for decades in New York City, in fact. So he had this extensive background in that kind of thing. And then Bill was the money guy. And in the very first meeting we had, and they brought in another guy, Steve. And Steve's deal is he owns a company that produces swag, gifts for conferences. If you're an Air Force organization and you want, jet airplanes made out of aluminum, he can get them made. If you want medallions for your conference, whatever it is. So, and then, he was going to do other things. He was going to he deals with shipping. So anything that we needed to ship, like the author's books, he was going to take care of all that. He was a good communicator with the venue, with outreach to some of our potential sponsors. So we all kind of thought, okay, we got skill set here. We have really intelligent people. Let's have a couple meetings and let's see if given 12 months, we can make this happen. Well, right out of the chute, Bill says, I want you to know we have no money worries. I have $50,000 and I'm pledging that. Well, I'm the guy who decides at this point, I'm taking the meeting minutes because I want all of this in the record.
Yes.
So, I produced the first agenda. I sent it out. We're running this kind of professional. I'm taking minutes. I bring them to the next meeting. Everyone reviews them before they get there. We approve the minutes. But there it is. Line 2, first set of minutes. Bill pledges $50,000 to cover this.
Wow.
Well, I thought, okay, let's find out more about the other guys. So we established what we were going to do. John and Bill said, we're in charge of this. We've got the top-down, overarching look, control, structure, organization. We're the honchos. Cool by me. Steve and I said, we'll be your principal consultants. Fine. So they go away with some tasking. They come back. Nothing gets done. And one of them had to do with getting the speakers. So I said, hey, I know some people.
Of course.
And I can best represent Wright-Patt because I worked there for 4 decades.
You bet.
And I'll tell them, well, you know how important this is? And you mentioned that at the top of the show, that it would be history making.
Yes.
So I said, well, let me do a survey. So I contacted a few people and they said, yeah, I'd love to do it. Now, there were no terms because, we hadn't even thought that far.
Right.
So at the next meeting, I said, well, look, you can't pay these people $5,000. You can't have that kind of a bill, because I'd done some math about ticket prices and, the venue. I'd already gotten some stuff for how big the venue was, how many seats. So I came up, and plus I've been a speaker and an attendee at a bunch of other conferences. Contact in the Desert. You and I were together at UFO MegaCon, which was a hoot. I loved it. In fact, you were the guy in front of me, so you set the audience up perfectly. They were in a great mood. Okay, so I now have some speakers who said okay. The next meeting, I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to fly them in and out. And I had already done some checking, and I had the people in mind, so I knew what cities they were going to fly out of. Mm-hmm. And it turns out for about $500 round trip, I could bring everyone here and get them back home. Then we had a good deal with the hotel. It was going to be like $129 a night with breakfast. And then I shot out to a couple of my potential invitees. I said, look, how about this level of honorarium, which was far below what people would normally get. And they said, yeah, because, guys like Daryl Sims said, I got to do this, man. I got to be there. This is one for the books. And that's the attitude that everyone gave me.
Yeah.
So I brought that back to the committee. The committee says, fine. And they said, would you mind being the guy to recruit the speakers? Well, then it snowballed. Now I'm finding the chinks in the armor. It's like, well, would you mind writing the contracts? What? Yeah. Can you write the contracts for the speaker? Can you negotiate this? Can you set up the schedule? And suddenly the guys that were supposed to be in charge weren't in charge of anything. So I said, well, okay, I don't really care because I want it done right. And this guy's got $50,000 of do it right money. And I thought, I'm in a sandbox here. I am going to get, and I want your listeners to really listen to this. Unspoken up until this moment, the speakers did not know why they got invited. The truth of the matter is I've been vetting the people in the UFO world for over a decade. And 7 of the 8 people I had extensive contact with and personal relationships with. I'd been on their shows. I'd seen them talk. I've read their books. I've researched them. And I declared them to be the best representatives for what I wanted done. And not only that, they were great human beings. They were honest people. They were people I could trust. If things went south, as they did, that they would have my back. So it wasn't just the fact that they accepted the terms. It was that they had to go through my burning hoops of fire to get to the starting line. And as that was going on, I had a concept for what topics I want covered in that conference. And I didn't want everybody to come in with the same story. So, we had Yvonne Smith. Well, first of all, let's go in order of the schedule. And stop me to get a word in edgewise, Peter, anytime you want to.
Actually, one thing before we move on, for a lot of folks that may be viewing or listening, the idea of, well, I think people understand already the challenges involved in putting together any kind of professional conference, but one on controversial subjects, sometimes even more so, especially if, your hotel chain has an attitude or whatever. That's changed quite a lot. One of the things that fascinated me the most was learning that on this base, not next to the base, is a hotel called the Hope Hotel. And then doing a little bit of digging on my own and learning that it was named after Bob Hope, who was one of those entertainers, of course, who was legendary in entertaining the troops, for decades. A nice honor. At the same time, I wonder what it was that made the original folks with this idea think, oh yeah, we'll just, be able to have this thing on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at a hotel right on the base. For me, that was kind of jaw-dropping to realize that there was this hotel. Not that we're going to be in a hangar or anything, but we were going to be on the base the whole
Right.
time. I had never not only heard of anybody trying to do this, I never even thought about it. And there's a certain amount of the Yiddish word of chutzpah that it
Absolutely.
took to approach the United States Air Force and say, hi, we'd like to have a UFO conference on not a airbase, but Wright-Patterson. That fine with you? That was a showstopper for me. But continue on.
Let me decode that for you. It turns out that the Hope Hotel was built by the State Department so that they could use that building to negotiate the Bosnia-Herzegovina peace accord, called the
Oh
Dayton
my.
Peace Accord. And it was originally, in order to get to that hotel, it was 100% behind the security fences and forces of the U.S. government. When that became surplus, they signed the treaty eventually somewhere in Paris, but all those meetings, all the bad boys and good boys stayed there. I mean, this was like a militarized zone in a militarized zone while all of those dignitaries were there. So when that was all said and done, I'm sure they were, Air Force, how do you want to use this building and whatever? And it was decided that they would allow a private entity to run that as a private hotel. So then they reconfigured the fences, and in a heartbeat, they could put up the old fence and it would be back behind the guard shack. But they reconfigured the fences, and there's a road right off the public highway, excuse me, that goes right to the Hope Hotel.
So
So
any of us could stay at the Hope Hotel in Ohio?
absolutely,
Oh my.
365 days a year. It's a privately held hotel. As far, according to them, the only one in the world that is like that, but it is still on federal property. So, I had to tell Daryl, you can't bring your sidearm. And even though, marijuana is legal, at least, I haven't tracked the laws here, but at least, pharmaceutically, you could not bring that into the hotel. So all federal laws apply. And if there's a brouhaha, the guards they're literally 50 feet with their M16s from the front door of the Hope Hotel, because remember, it was built to be a secure place for those negotiations. So that's how that all came about.
I see.
And that's how we were able to kind of get on the base, yet not force everyone to go through a guard gate.
Understood.
So it came to the point where I got good people like yourself to say, yeah, I'd love to be part of this. And then I try to get, as I was asking people, so, there's a bunch of burning hoops that I had to push the speakers through. And so I said, okay, I need a abduction researcher therapist. Bang, my friend Yvonne. I need somebody who's the guy on recovery and cover up. Bam, Stan Gordon. You know, I need a guy with implants, Daryl Sims. And I mean, this thing, people literally were lining up, but I had to be very selective for all the reasons that I have already stated. And then, you know, my buddy Paul Davis, who wrote the endorsement for my first book, and who actually at one time wanted to drive the alien from the Roswell movie and do a thing about it and then give a talk here. And we had that all set up till the Pentagon shut it down. And I wrote that story in my first book.
Yes.
So then I had Dr. Kitai because I wanted this mass sighting. So it took some work, but it all fell together, and I had all these beautiful speakers to talk about all these different aspects with and of course, finally, after I chased him, I chased Travis longer than the aliens chased Travis. It took me months, and blessed Jen Stein and Dr. Kitai, who you know, rattled his cage every chance they had, and they finally got him to say yes. And so we had Travis Walton, you know, probably the world's finest witness. Well, now we've got this all together, and now I had 7 of the 8 speakers already committed, and I think most under contract by sometime in January. And it was still Travis. And I'll tell you, people were just contacting me every day. I'd love to be the speaker. And I go, yeah, I'll put you in the pool. You know, I'll put you in the backup pool.
Yeah.
So come around, and I'm skipping over a lot of stuff, but come around mid-January, I have a discussion with John, and John goes, Bill is very sick. He is possibly going to lose a leg or worse. And we need to talk about him continue to be part of this. Yeah. So I always try to get things in writing, but Bill was pretty slick because Bill is former CIA. So we discovered later. But that has nothing to do with the cancellation, I assure you. Yeah. Well, that was my first truth bomb. There's more. So now John tells me Bill's probably going to have to drop out. He's very sick. And I get a phone call that says, hey, this is Bill, and call me back. So Bill says, I'm going to be hospitalized for 6 to 8 weeks. I have all these treatments. I'm going to try to save my leg. And eventually he wound up losing part of his toes and his foot and stuff. And right now they're contemplating, you know, what the next step is. So he said, I talked it over with my wife, and because I can't be there to at least oversee what's going on, I have to take the money back. So, you know, I've contracted with 7 world-class speakers, and we're in negotiations because when Bill dropped out, then we had to renegotiate with the venue. And I'll tell you, and that's a very important part of the story. So we had that, and so we could have folded our tent right there, and everyone would have forgave us because the money was gone. So we ran the numbers, and I said, look, I got this ticket pricing thing. We only need to sell 200 full passes. And if we don't do anything stupid and frilly and whatever, you know, if we're 6 weeks out and we're still short, most people don't buy their tickets until the last 2 weeks anyway.
Right. And any tickets can be refunded that are bought early.
That's right. But we had to make financial commitments to the audiovisual group. That was several $1,000s. We had to sign a contract with the venue, and those 2 cancellations would have cost us probably $8,000 or $9,000 in cancellation fees. So first, the money's gone. So what we said is, look, we're confident we're going to sell 200 tickets, and we had 500 seats. So, you know, somewhere 40% capacity, we're golden. So we run the numbers again. Yeah, we're good. We canceled a couple of frills things, and we got the budget down, and, you know, I got some concessions here and there. So I'm just going to throw out a number just because I don't have the actual one in front of me, but we said fixed cost are $35,000. It's fixed. And we still had some other things that we needed, like we needed to print matter. We had to get it into like this widespread US mail thing just so we could blanket the local counties. That was going to be a couple $1,000s. So now we're ratcheting up that now it's $10,000 in things, other costs that could come up that would be not reimbursed. So we had a verbal agreement between the three of us. We would cover any shortfall. Great. That's all agreed. Everyone's going to do it. It's in the minutes of a meeting. Now, fast forward to last week, Monday. We have a meeting. It's me, Steve, John, and Bill comes out of his sick bed to basically support Steve, because Steve was going to take over the recruiting sponsors to get us money to put us at less of a financial risk.
Sure.
So Bill was there to say, I'm here, I can help Steve. I can phone call. I've got a handful of people he needs to meet with. There's the county guy. I got this mayor lined up. I got this, local rep. You're going to go to these people, use my name to open the door. And Bill's like, Steve's like, yeah, we're going to do this, right? The next day, last week, Tuesday, we get a message from Steve saying, I'm working my business 18 hours a day. I don't have time for this. I'm bailing. And then he starts quoting some business law bullshit about how he wants to be extracted. Dude, all you got to tell us is you don't want to do it. And we're going to give you the $100 back that you deposited to start our bank account for the tickets. Don't give me all this, pseudo business legal school dropout stuff.
Yeah.
So he really copped this bad attitude. And I can think of a lot of reasons why. One, I think he didn't know what he was going to do with the sponsors. He had never done that before. And we were actually asking him to do something tangible, something productive. The only thing he did was he already sold like thousands of dollars of swag to Bill. So Steve didn't care. He already had his money. So he didn't care if it went off or not. He's like, I've already sold the swag. And now, of course, Bill's stuck with it. Now, just to tell you how little I believe this, we saw Bill sitting at a lunch with the venue's booking agent for 2 hours. They were having a nice social lunch in that hotel. Dude, if you've got 18 hours of work, how are you affording? And he was no longer as a part of our group. So his thing was social. It was not to find out the questions we had been asking the venue since the end of January that they would not answer. So to me, I went, well, you obviously gave us an excuse. We're glad you're gone. We don't believe you. And, it was good riddance. So he just kind of showed himself instantaneously that it was a bunch of BS. Now we come to the tough part. Since we had to renegotiate the contract and they issued a new one, we've been asking them 3 basic questions. And all of those questions were financially based. There were incentives in the original contract with Bill.
This is the contract with the hotel.
The hotel contract with Bill, and he used his company to sign it. Bill so-and-so from such and such company, and he made a $2,000 deposit. Well, they gave him his money back. They ripped up the contract and said, you 3 guys who formed this company now need to come in and sign a new contract. Well, the first thing they removed was a food and beverage incentive because we had that Friday night dinner. If we sold $2,000 worth of food or more, which would have been a piece of cake, they were going to refund us the $2,000 it was going to cost us for that one night rental.
Wow.
So there was $2,000 right there. The other incentive is Bill had negotiated a commission on all the rooms that were going to be booked, either through us for our speakers, our staff, and the attendees. So there were hundreds of rooms times at least 2 nights. So the total incentives that suddenly disappeared from the contract was about $10,000.
Oh my gosh.
The other thing was we asked them in writing 3 times and verbally in their office, more than that, and once in a meeting. And I have the minutes from that meeting. And the question was, we need to see a schedule of if we cancel, what our penalty is.
Right.
So they said, well, look at your contract. And we did. And it said, all right, more than 60 days out, you owe 50% of estimated cost.
God.
Then if it's 30 days out, it's 75%. Less than 30 days, it's the whole $8,300. So I said, there is no terminology in this contract that tells me what an estimated total is. It's not in there. So you need to tell me in dollars and cents, not in percentages, of that $8,300. So in the meeting, and it's in the minutes,
Right.
the head of the whole thing said, oh, nothing would happen. You'll get your deposit back. And I have it recorded in the minutes. Oh, nothing will happen. You'll get it back. So then immediately within days, I sent off, now it's at the end of January, I sent off the inquiry that said, that does not compute in my brain what you said at the meeting. I need to know specifically because this is already giving percentages and whatnot, and you said nothing. So I need something in writing, and that's just it. I don't think they wanted to lose the contract. So they were willing to say anything to get us to re-sign the contract and then go, oh, no, see, it's in the contract. So I personally gave them 3 inquiries on the same questions, like the stuff is missing, what happened to that, and what does this mean? John did the same thing. So I'm guessing we asked them at least 10 times in writing and in person. We never could get a response from them. So we asked the girl as she was going to lunch with our former partner on Friday, when John and I were there to discuss, what we were going to do going forward. We said, before you disappear into that pub, can you tell us once again, what does this mean? Does it mean that we're going to lose 50% of the $8,300? And she said, yeah, that's what it means. Well, can I get that in writing? And she just spun around and left.
Oh,
So at that point, John and I went into the meeting and I said, John, not only have we lost Steve, who was going to fund 30% of the gap,
yeah,
but Steve told me I only got a couple of grand. That's the most I can put in. Now, suddenly I'm thinking, it's not my conference. I'm supposed to be the chief consultant, not the financier.
You bet.
And it was at that point I just went, peace out, man. Peace out. So now you know the whole story, and there's a few people to blame for it, but I'm not laying blame. I'm just saying we're all to blame. I'm to blame.
Also, shit happens, and sometimes things just don't come together, no matter how earnest your efforts. Everything that you've said explains it, but at the same time, and I am not one of those people who is a classic conspiracist. I don't see hidden hands behind every, aspect of what we see in public. At the same time, there is a 2-ton elephant behind the brick wall here that I'll call the United States Air Force. And part of me from the get-go has been thinking to myself, somewhere up the food chain in the United States Air Force, running into the Pentagon possibly, somebody or individuals have either said, no reason to interfere with having a UFO conference on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Sure, why not? As opposed to, are you kidding us? This is not appropriate. And now that you've started the machinations here, we have to find a way to make this not happen, because we've just put out this new report. yet one more level of classic denial. We don't want to do anything to encourage people to think that. Do you think that there has been any kind of hidden hand activity here? I'm completely playing devil's advocate here, and I'm perfectly comfortable accepting a response that dismisses, this question.
I doing virtually everything else except for the website. And I want to give John on the team just a shout out because he had no experience, but he learned how to create the website, get the ticketing thing going. He was
Great.
responsible for, organizing and creating the paperwork to create the company and change his LLC into, a triple owner LLC. He used different legal sites to put together a set of operating procedures. So, when it came time to do something that was really necessary, one of the long poles, he got it done. And so, kudos to John. I was responsible for, no, actually, let's back this up because it's a more interesting story. Fairborn, Ohio is synonymous with Wright-Patterson because it literally engulfs it, on the southeastern side. And many airmen, officers through the years, employees have lived in Fairborn. So it's the home of Wright-Patt, even though Dayton and Huber and Beaver Creek and all the others try to claim it. So at one of our meetings, we got the newly elected mayor of Fairborn to show up. And he was psyched because the original idea for this of John and Bill was not a pure UFO conference. It was a festival like Roswell and Exeter and McMinnville.
Yeah.
They wanted to have a 5K race, and the old Fairborn movie theater was being refurbished, and they wanted to show like Paul David's movie and Jen Stein's movie. And we were going to give them free popcorn and do all kinds of things. So there was going to be a parade, and so we were trying to psych up, the city fathers. And so they were like, yeah, this is really cool. Well, as time went on, they couldn't guarantee that the theater was going to be ready in time, even though it was a year out. We didn't have enough people. And Bill was starting to go through that, I'm not sure I'm going to make it kind of stuff. So, the number of people we had to do this was shrinking. There wasn't enough time to recruit people. So we had to tell the city of Fairborn, there's no 5K. We can't commit to your theater and rent your school buses to move people around. So basically, we'd still like your support in some way, advertise us on your website, low cost stuff. We have not heard back from that mayor. I've written them. The other guys have written them. It's like we do not exist. Okay, so I'm not throwing a guy under the bus because he's only been in the saddle for X number of months, and he's got a city to run. And this is like part of the circus. So he can just go, yeah, we'll get to the animals later. But gone, nothing, zero. And I want to throw the Greene County Visitors Bureau under the bus a little bit later. So I'm sorry, man. Oh, the Air Force. The Air Force. So it was my job. The mayor told us, hey, I'm a retired Air Force colonel. Ding, 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 ding. And my buddy is the deputy base commander. So I am going to get you an audience with him.
Wow.
And we're going to all go in together. We're going to trumpet this, and we're going to try to get some base support. Yeah, I know it's bad, but I'm going to use the buddy system, and we're going to see if we can get his boss, the base commander, to be the not the keynote speaker, but to do the welcome on Friday night.
That'd be amazing. Would have been.
Now, this is a true story. I am not making this up. Within a week after I went through the public affairs office, and you got to fill out a form for them, and you say, here's why this is good for the Air Force. You have to justify why the base commander should be there to do the talk. Yeah. So I've done this before because I worked on the base. So I go ahead and I type it all up. It's pristine. I submit it. Even before the public affairs office, let's say I submitted on a Tuesday. By Friday, there's a big article in the Dayton Daily News. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base commander to be replaced for lack of leadership. The same week, but it gets better. So the mayor who was going to hook us up with his buddy who was the deputy base commander is now the acting base commander. So that would be kind of one reason why the mayor stopped talking to us about it, because his buddy is not like this unknown deputy. He's now the guy responsible for the base. So I said, I understand that. Before public affairs can get back to me, I get an email from the head of local public affairs. We just want to let you know that the guy that you've been communicating with on this has been reassigned on an emergency basis to a foreign country, and he will no longer be handling your request.
I'll cut you off for one moment. Coincidences are real. I don't think necessarily that this, maybe it was just the way it was going to go anyway. Is your deeper intuition, though, that this was linked in some way to the events we're talking about?
No, I don't. I just find it funny. And I'm like you, Peter. I'm not a conspiracy guy, but I'm a truth guy when I find it.
Yes.
And I think conspiracy guys they're just the best informed people. And so they know that some bad stuff is going down and people are lying and whatnot. So I just take it as it's a hilarious coincidence. And they put the head of their public affairs office in charge of it and not one of the underlings. Plus the delay that this thing had, because it should have been a no-brainer. We'll check his calendar and no, he's not available. But I made it stickier for them because I said, I worked my entire career for Air Force Research Labs, and I would rather have the AFRL director than the base commander because it's closer to what his people do. It's science and technology. Yeah. And that's the guy I want to do the address. So finally, after weeks, and again, if I have to go to court, I've got the dates and I can tell you, how long the gap was, and it's all there. Eventually they get back to me and they say, and this is the truth, our weekend and the Air Force Marathon weekend are exactly the same. So we're going to have 20,000 runners here. All the hotel rooms are going to be full. Friday night of Air Force Marathon week is the big banquet the night before. And runners, I have 16 marathons that I entered and completed, including 2 Bostons. And so I know that going at 7 o'clock at night, the night before a marathon, you got to get up in a couple of hours, and eating a full meal is the worst thing to do. But runners do it at every race. And the base commander is always there to give the address and welcome the 15,000 runners.
Did we know about this months before?
The guy who booked the hotel didn't find out about it. And when we did, we had no place to move it. They were booked before, after. So
checkmate.
I know the Air Force, I know the base commander has to be there, and that is the place that he should be. But none of those other guys I requested are going to be there. But here, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm going to just paraphrase it. It said the base commander can't be there because he's given the address right down the street at the Air Force Museum at the marathon banquet. And this event is not in the best interest of our senior leaders.
Right. That was the phrase.
Wait a minute. You're saying you can't find evidence of something happening. You just put out another report that said you can't find any evidence. I'm literally bringing it to your doorstep. The biggest building with the most people, building 262, can't be more than 50 feet away. It is literally right behind the guard shack, right next to the hotel. I'm bringing the evidence to your doorstep, and you're telling me the people who are responsible to keep our skies clear is not in their best interest to see this stuff?
I think the missing phrase was it's not in their best public relations interest to see this stuff. You forget stuff sometimes. God, absolutely outrageous.
Wow. Yeah, let that sink in.
Yeah, yeah. It's again, a number of wonderful UFO conferences have simply not fully materialized for any combination of the conventional, if slightly unusual circumstances that you've cited with this conference. But that last piece, um, it's hard to imagine that if everything went fine, if they really felt this, that it would have had the kibosh at the end anyway. And the Air Force would have quashed it because it's not in the best interests of the leadership. Again, a line open to interpretation. Um, as an optimist, I keep trying to think, is there a way to come back at this? And there's only one Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And if, well, even with the proper financial backing, looking at it all now from the perspective of fully informed in retrospect, do you feel that this conference could have been a reality or that it was destined for several
It,
reasons to
it
not
could
be?
easily have been a reality
Yeah.
based upon the people who told me that they were interested, that they were coming. Um, Early ticket sales, within a few days, we had sold $3,000 worth of tickets.
That's
You
great.
know, that's, and we had 6 months to go. So
Ah,
we already had 10% of what we
yeah.
needed in the first couple of days. So, I mean, just do the math on that. And again, we only needed to sell, I said 200. So with the uncertainty of the stuff in the new contract with the venue,
Yeah.
maybe we needed another 25 or 50 tickets sold. But
Yeah.
clearly, we needed less than 50% of the seats we had. We had the best lineup ever. I mean, just go through history and try to find a better lineup of speakers in one place, and the location we had, and the
No.
low cost. We had the Air Force Museum as a huge attraction right down the
Yeah.
street. There was so much going for it.
Mm.
I just kind of feel, I have to really think about it because, the other guy we mentioned, Steve, it turns out Steve admitted to us that he was on an Air Force crash recovery team. And part of his job was to make sure that when something crashed and it was recovered, that he made sure there was enough junk, trash that was laid into the field where there would be no trace of the original crash. And by now, just before the break, your audience is going, WTF.
When Steve, and as an aside, Steve confided this to you not in the deepest confidence. It came up casually, or it was just a matter of fact thing. Because
Waiting for one of our members to show up for a meeting, sitting in the pub drinking water. He even told me how they did it. Now he didn't say UFOs. He basically said when planes crashed, he was on the team to recover and make sure that the C-40s or whatever they were flew over and liberally junked it up with metal.
huh. Wow.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Damn it. Um, all things considered, I mean, this has just come down over the past few days. I know this is a huge personal letdown. Um, how are you doing tonight?
I'm more relieved than anything. I was having palpitations and, chest gripping and all that for the last several weeks,
Mm.
ever since Bill pulled out his money. Yeah, simply because I knew we didn't have the right team,
Yeah.
and Even if someone had come along, an angel investor, and said, here's the 50 grand, we couldn't have done it because my heart was no longer in it.
Yeah,
I had zero motivation. And I could just see that, in that contract with the venue, there's a thing called force majeure.
Yep.
And it basically said, by the way, if the base shuts down for any reason, terrorist threat or whatever, all y'all got to leave the hotel and there's nothing you can do about it. And all that money you sunk in, tough, it's gone.
And on that note, we will be back in 4 minutes. My special guest tonight is Raymond Szymanski. This is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. Don't go away.
I'll be back.
Hey, UFO conference enthusiasts. We've got another great event for you in 2024. The Saucers and Aliens Kansas UFO Day in Dimension G is being held in the UFO capital of Kansas, Geneseo, on July 6th. This is a fun festival in the middle of nowhere. There will be a parade, decorated yards, costumes, vendors, speakers, and a showing of the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. Appropriately, an 8-foot-tall statue of Gort and a statue of Klaatu will be dedicated. This will be the only museum in the U.S. with these custom-made statues. If you'd like to donate to the statue project or attend the event, visit GeneseoMuseum.com. That's GENESEO Museum.com. Be sure to bring your camera when you attend the event. That's GeneseoMuseum.com.
The UNX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full-spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the UNX Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com.
And welcome back. Peter Robbins here. The show is Meanwhile here on Earth. My special guest is Raymond Szymanski. Come on back, Ray.
Come on back.
Let's talk a little bit about the base and its history. What makes it, where does the legend begin? Why should we assume that this base is associated with this extraordinary subject to the degree it is?
I'll answer that if I can just do one thing, if you'll give me the liberty. I want to sum up the whole conference thing on a positive note.
Sure.
Despite the fact that we were, underprepared, overwhelmed, everybody worked extremely hard up until the point that they couldn't anymore. And I just wanted to make that known to your audience. I don't think it was anybody's fault per se, but at the point where 50% of your workforce leaves and your costs are going up every day, doubling and tripling, and there are contractual issues that you're just not going to resolve. Like Clint Eastwood once said, every man should know his limitations. And we had clearly reached ours. And it was just time to apologize to everybody and let the speakers know 6 months in advance that it was canceled and that they're A-listers and they're all going to get jobs for that weekend. And then, we're just going to go off and hopefully learn something from this. So I just want to shout out to my fellow committee guys. I'm sorry it didn't work out. I know we all worked hard, but, we were just overcome by events. So let's leave it on a positive note. And so I'll now answer your question about the base.
I think
yes.
we should even begin with your long involvement with the base, because you are one of a handful of people I know who are in the most scholarly position to back up this legend, myth, lore, ultimately reality, as we know.
Well, back in 1947, we had the Roswell crash, right? Long before my time. And we know for a fact that whatever was recovered at Roswell went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That's a known historical fact because Jesse Marcel said it. General Dubose, who was chief of staff for the 8th Army Air Corps, where the material came from Roswell and passed to his office, he signed an affidavit many years later saying, yeah, it was there and it went to Wright-Patterson. So of that, there was no doubt. Yeah. And we know it went to the materials lab. So even before Roswell, there were actually incidents that happened that I have found pre-Roswell newspaper reports that mention Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the same sentence as these unusual sightings. So yes.
Senator Barry Goldwater, who in his own way has a unique place in the history of UFO studies. I don't think I have to tell anybody who he was, a senior senator from Arizona, a father of the modern conservative movement, a decent man, and ultimately a reserve officer general in the United States Air Force. For anybody who has dug through the ephemera and the paperwork of the early days of UFOs, knows that Senator Goldwater exchanged correspondence with a number of people over the years regarding how seriously he took the subject. I had a number of letters in my files for many years, but this afternoon, digging down a little bit deeper in preparation for the show, I did a search and I found that there was a letter. I don't remember when he died, but it was written in 1994 to a researcher in California, and it made a connection with Roswell that I've been completely unaware of. And I'm just going to read the letter to that point, and we can move forward from there. July 26, 1994. Dear Mr. Jeffrey, you touched something very close to me by your letter. Roswell has long been a point of great interest to me. Since the first UFOs turned up, you see, I both believe in UFOs and don't believe in them. My argument is that God, in creating the universe as he did, would not have just made one planet with living beings. Here's the thing, though. Butch Blanchard was a very close friend of mine. This was the base commander at Roswell who gave the go-ahead to make that information public. I worked with him in the Air Force, and I am almost certain that I knew your father, the colonel. And he goes on from there. But that connection um, between Goldwater and the base commander, who he didn't just know, but he considered a good friend, was new information as far as I was concerned.
Definitely. Blanchard went on to become a general,
Yeah.
and Dubose, who was a lieutenant colonel, became a colonel. Nobody got really, because they kept their mouth shut until 1978.
Yeah.
Everyone got promoted, go along, get along kind of thing. We know that whatever was picked up in Roswell came to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And so back in 1978, when Stanton Friedman interviewed Major Jesse Marcel, that's when he let the cat out of the bag and confirmed that the Air Force had taken the material to Wright-Patt. Now, why Wright-Patt? Well, obviously the Wright brothers were there, and they were probably the top science area for aeronautics and materials. So if anything fell out of the sky, they could take it to Wright-Patt, and the materials director would go, hey, not ours, or, we've got these machines and we can test it and we can tell you maybe what it is you have, maybe an exotic metal or something. So clearly we know it went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and then all those years later, and as of course we had Grudge and Sign and Blue Book. So that the investigative arm of the Air Force for flying saucers was at Wright-Patt. So there was that connection. So then Marcel said, "No, well, we got the crash connection," and so that just it built up. And now recently, one of our local reps, Representative Turner, came, he's on the intelligence committee that made the decision to stop the disclosure. He's the rep from Dayton. Well, even though it was in the newspaper, a lot of people don't realize that in the days prior to them making that final decision of what to do, he came to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for a briefing at the former home of Project Blue Book. He and other members of that intelligence committee, and they're the ones who put the kibosh on disclosure and watered that bill down or whatever they're going to release. It was Representative Turner, and it wasn't until after he had gotten some information here at Wright-Patterson. So it clearly tells you that whatever they're doing relative to flying saucers is still happening at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Else there would have been no need for Representative Turner to show up on the base. And then coincidentally make the decision he did after the meeting and not before the meeting.
Ray, you're a scientist, you're a pragmatist, you're a logical thinker. You're also an Ohio native, and you grew up in Dayton, as I remember.
Negative. I grew up in Detroit.
Ah, okay.
Starts with a D, but it's a different city.
And the same number of syllables too. My question is, do you remember as a young person when you first heard about this whole flying saucer, unidentified flying object thing, and how that sat with you as a young person?
Quite honestly, I don't have any memory of it until I got on base in 1973. And I had a mentor, Al. I wrote about it in the book, so
Yes.
I'll do the short version. He wants to take me from our little 2-story business building through this 250-foot hangar, which was unused at the time, into the next set of buildings where there was a coffee shop, and he wanted to buy me a candy bar, kind of a welcoming gift. I'm a starving co-op student. I was probably 130 pounds. He goes, "Oh man, got to buy this kid a sandwich." So we step into this dark hangar, and now it's beautiful. It's a Wright Field Fitness Center, and it's got all these machines and a running track and basketball courts, but it was dark. And so we step into this thing and he goes, "Have you heard about our aliens?" I'm like this co-op student from the University of Detroit. I don't know aliens. So I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, back in the 40s, there was this crash of a vehicle, and they brought that vehicle here and its occupants to Wright-Patterson. And I'm like, thinking, this guy must be from Mars himself, because you're losing me. So as we're walking through this dark, and I only know this guy for a couple days. I'm thinking, what am I getting myself into? He's talking about aliens and crashes and recoveries. So, we have this conversation, and we finally get the candy bar, and, what I could surmise is that, there was some stuff happen. So in the ensuing days and weeks and months, I had 4 months there before I'd go back to school and continue school. Then I'd come back for 4 months and, do the co-op thing. So I'd ask everybody. I'd ask, Doug in accounting and all of his friends. I said, "Man, Al just told me about these aliens that they brought to Wright-Patt." And they go, "Oh yeah, they're in the tunnels." I'm like, what?
Did
So
you
when I
get
found
a
out,
sense that these guys were yanking your chain, or that they were
no,
speaking matter of
no,
factly, this is the way it is here?
no, I got a sense that the entire base was aware. Now, this was 1973, so Blue Book had only been closed down for 4 years. And I got the sense that they were all familiar with all of that stuff. It was part of the base culture. There were TV shows about it. There was original Project Blue Book. There were TV shows. It was always in the newspaper. Major Quintanilla was always in the news. Especially, 66, a lot of those guys were there, from that time period with the swamp gas thing. So lots of stuff going down, the closure. They had the corporate history. And the corporate base history was, yeah, we've got them in the lab and in the tunnels and whatnot. So they just kind of pass that along to you, not with any malice or intent. It's just like, all right, it's your turn to learn about it.
Yeah. Damn. I did not remember that it was like that from your book, but I read it some time back.
Right.
And
it's that way today.
In the weeks, the months, the years that followed, was there any point where you felt this is a bit much, or I'm closer to this than I want to be, or somebody has told me about something that kind of puts this over the top for me?
Yeah, you kind of meet your girl, my wife of 40 some years. She'll kill me if I don't get the number right, but it's 47 years. Hard, it's like blink of an eye. And you have kids, you're raising kids. I coached year round. I coached soccer and softball, and I had 2 kids who were active. They both, they both made the high school team and did well there for the soccer. In fact, our school has won a state championship, not with my boys, but they were kind of on the leading edge of that. The players getting better. So I was busy. I was traveling. I was working for the guys in the Pentagon as one of their program managers, doing lab stuff for the Pentagon. So I'll let you put that together. And so I was doing a lot of traveling, and I put it wasn't up here, it was back here. So I'd go to a contractor's place and they go, "All right, now what we're going to show you is classified, And then I think, does this have anything to do with aliens? So I was always kind of, snooping around a corner, or asking a question about, "Hey, you ever guys hear about hypervelocity or exotic metals, or just something to," but it wasn't an active pursuit. And what triggered it was, believe it or not, the Phoenix Lights in '97.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
Because by that time, my kids were teenagers, and, I wasn't coaching their soccer teams 5 nights a week, because they were on the high school team or on a traveling team, and they had other coaches for that. Even though I coached them through softball, till the day they graduated high school, I could spend some time looking into that. So the Phoenix Lights kind of, captivated me, and I took advantage of my connections to people who had connections to, like, photo analysts, and I'd bring them something and I go, I'd get the best copy of something I could, and I'd say, well, what do you think about that? And 2 weeks later, they come back with a manila envelope and they go, I think this is for you. And, I'd open up and there might be a typed thing like, yeah, this looks really good. Or, it might be it was always returned to me in an envelope here. And, yeah, there were some things that flamed out. They went, no, absolutely not. This is a hoax. We've seen it. But
Sure.
there were a couple that they went, if you know the source, we can't we can't, we can't go against it. Um, so yeah, it looks really good to us. If you can verify the source, then we can't debunk this picture. And so I had a couple of those, which were really, really cool. And it turns out that their guys were like, hey, who's giving you these photos? And they turned out that I kind of turned them on to an interest in this. So if you guys are still out there working, I'm glad I could help you get an interest.
At a certain point, your interest kind of crossed a certain threshold. It's one thing to be curious about a subject, another thing to become deeply interested, even obsessed by it, but to make the commitment to take that interest and write a book. Your first book, your most recent book, Swamp Gas My Ass, is a very powerful account of a very important UFO related event. And it features the individual, the pilot, who was the center of the story. How did you guys connect up? How did you get the idea for the book? And was there something that created that jump to take it into print?
Well, go back to my first book. What happened is I never planned to write a book. And then I had promised myself through all the years that when I retire, I'd go to a couple of UFO conferences. And I wanted to see, are there aliens? Yes. Aliens? No. Aliens maybe. I just had to find the truth for myself. So before I retired, actually, I started to do some field investigation at locations where famous things happened, like the 1965 Exeter landing. And I actually had a chance to locate and find the son of the guy who's written in John Fuller's book. It was his father's farmhouse over which Norman Muscarello saw the famous flying saucer, as did the two patrolmen from Exeter, New Hampshire. So I got to talk to his son. So that kind of, that was like 2007, 2008. I went, hey, there's some evidence out here. There's still people I can talk to, even though this stuff happened, 40, 50 years ago. So, and that guy introduced me to people who had stories, who had sightings, who had evidence, but they couldn't talk about it because they were like the head of the Exeter Academy, or they were, the mayor, and these guys were still alive, and they told me their story. So that initial search for the proof really got me going. Then I went to the conferences, and I got to meet a lot of people, and I quickly learned, you get this built-in BS meter, who's telling you the truth, and who you can trust. So, you'd kind of develop that, and then you develop this I'll call it a experiencer radar, where somebody comes up to you and talks to you at one of the conference. You can immediately go, oh, this person's an experiencer, even though they don't tell you about it. There's just something about the way they talk about the whole phenomena that you go, I bet in 3 questions I can get them to admit it. And I've kind of developed this very crazy kind of, I call it an experiencer radar, if you will. So then, I got to meet a lot of people like Dr. Kitai, who sat down with me for an hour. She didn't know me. Sat down with me, have all her photographs, boop, boop, boop. She's going through everything. And I got to meet people like that who were just totally unafraid to sit down with me one-on-one. Oh, you're a Wright-Patt, you're a scientist guy. Yeah, well, ask me anything you want. And if they didn't have the answer, then they would get back to me. So at one point, I'd gone with Travis. Here's how serendipitous this was. I met Jen Stein in a hallway. Hi, Jen, blah, blah, blah. And I think her movie Travis was coming out. And so she said, hey, we're having dinner with everybody.
Oh.
And come join our table, where the International Congress is. They're in Fountain Hills, that beautiful little place they had. So it was a bunch of people I didn't know, but Paul Davids sat next to me, and
Great.
Jen sat next to him, and Travis was down there. And there's just a whole bunch of people that, in fact, if you look in my first book, I put the photograph in there, so you'll know who was actually sitting down. Yeah, that's the book. So it was on this trip. I think it was, I can't remember, maybe 2014 or 15 with the International Congress. And so we're sitting at this table. And afterwards, we're just kind of socializing. But people haven't left. They kind of stand up and they're talking to other people they didn't get a chance to. So I said, Jen, I just want to let you know, one of the things I'm going to do is I've spent years researching the Travis case, and I think I can find the location. And I just kind of, as an aside, I said, I'm going to go up there to see if I can find the actual location. And she goes, well, she goes, well, what are you going to do when you're up there? I said, well, I understand there's been some trees cut and there may be some anomalies with these rings and exponential growth on the side that was facing the flying saucer. She goes, well, you know what happened? She said, and I don't think her movie was launched yet. She said, we never took still photographs of some of those tree stumps. And we're not sure if we're going to get up before the movie goes, wide release. What kind of camera do you have? I said, well, I've got a professional Canon 20D. I have all the lenses, got everything I need. I got tripods. I said, the only thing I don't have is the exact location. So this is where the crazy stuff happens. She says to me, after this dinner, she goes, well, I know somebody who might be able to show you where that is. And my heart's beating and I'm thinking, well, she's going to take me up there. Next thing I know, she yells, hey, Travis, get over here. So Travis comes over. Hey, Jen, what's up? Travis, I want you to meet Ray Szymanski. Oh, yeah, I know him. Okay, fine. She goes, Travis, I need you to do us a favor. Okay, what? I need you to meet Ray at your location. You're going to take him. He's going to take photographs. You're going to show him those trees. I'm like, I'm frozen in time. And he goes, okay. So he gives me his phone number. He goes, call me. Sure enough, I go up there and I do some preliminary stuff. I call him. He comes up. We spend the entire afternoon. That evening we go to the restaurant. Afterwards, he comes to the room. We're having coffee. We're shooting a breeze. We're looking at the photos we took. It was at that point that I realized I know some stuff. I've got some stuff here that nobody really knows, or, it's not out there yet. I have a story that I could tell. I had the Exeter stuff. I had talked to the Rendlesham guys. I had the Wright-Patt stuff. I had the Travis Walton stuff. And I said, I've got to put this stuff out there because there's some crazy stuff that happened. And I don't want to make it overwhelmingly spooky or factual. I want to make it a travel adventure. I want to bring people in who wouldn't ordinarily read this stuff.
Yes.
I made it funny and people said, this is freaking hilarious. But the Brits are pissed at me because they thought that when I described my trip to the Olympics and all the things that happened in Rendlesham Forest along the way, they thought I was making fun of them instead of with them. And I got some nasty stuff. They made it a point when my book came out to 1 star it on Amazon. And Amazon contacts me and go, what did you do to the people in the UK? Your book's 5-star in the US and it's 1 star in the UK. And I had to explain to Kindle or Amazon, whoever it was, because they were looking into this because I complained. And I said, it's in the book. I've gotten hate mail about this. But anyway, that's how I got into it. That when I just said, I want to share this. And then I met Victoria and I got Victoria to tell me her story about her abductions. And I wrote that one. And then I vowed I wasn't doing a trilogy because enough is enough. And I wanted to do other things. And then the most efficient way that I can tell you how I connected with Colonel Carroll, the hero, is I ran him down.
And
I
we're talking
literally,
here about the central character in Swamp Gas.
Colonel Gary K. Carroll, I literally ran him down.
In your car?
Yes, I live in the area where every other person on the block either works at the base or is retired from the base.
Got it.
And they're intelligence officers to retired generals, colonels, majors. We have a couple of former enlisteds, GS-15s, retired 14s, former SESs, down to GS-5s. So once you're when people know that you're retired from the base, you're kind of in a club, and they're not afraid to talk to you about things. And then when you piece things together, you realize, oh, well, let me see. That guy that he knows was a pilot during this time period. I wonder what he flew. Could he have been an interceptor pilot? And then, you're tracking down things. And eventually I had enough clues that convinced me that this could have been a guy who, in his 20-year career, with a stick between his legs and a rocket behind him, that he might have been one of the guys that were told, don't talk about flying saucers. And again, I just went to his house. Up to he was there on the lawn with his dog. I introduced myself. I told him, who I was. I was retired, and I wrote these books. And he goes, "Oh, what are they about?" And I go, "Well, one of them is about Wright-Patt and flying saucers." And he goes, "Really?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, then you're going to want to talk to me."
That kind of says it.
That's the book right there, dedicated to Colonel Gary K. Carroll, who then, over the course of 30 hours of taped, videoed interviews, slowly reveals to me that in 1966, he was an F-106 pilot stationed at Selfridge Air Force Base, which was literally only miles away from where the swamp gas flying saucers were being reported. In fact, people on the base were the first to report to, they reported to, it was the controllers. Once a plane was aloft, it was the central controllers. I want to say Grand Rapids, but it's more central to the thing. Anyway, the controllers, they were the first ones. The personnel, the fly guys, the guys who were supposed to be intercepting, their observers who were out at night said, "Hey, there's flying saucers over our base." So they called Central Command, NORAD, whoever, and they eventually, in the form of Colonel Carroll and his wingman, Bob Nicholson, they were on 5-minute alert. The klaxon goes off. They have 5 minutes to get their F-106s airborne. They get it up. They're now being vectored by the central controller in and around Ann Arbor, Dexter, Hillsdale, all the places that the reports had come out to, and forced Blue Book in the form of Dr. Hynek to go in, do his 2.5-day investigation, whatever. So,
and let me jump in for one moment, because most of us associate Dr. Hynek's name with an heroic contributor to the field, certainly during his years in investigation in the UFO field. He was arguably the very best known and most recognizable ufologist in the world, period. And this is still 5 years before he has his dark night of the soul, change of consciousness, so to say, and is still an asset of the CIA. He's the one who came up with that idiotic term, swamp gas, and had to live it down after the fact. Also, just going back again to this wonderfully serendipitous connection with my dear friend and close colleague, Jennifer Stein, and how she kind of pulled you into this. Jennifer is one of the secret weapons of ufology. She is a tireless. She is one of the best organized people I know. Her attitude is brilliant. She is the best conference organizer that I know. And I'm very proud to have been an associate producer on that documentary, which is called Travis, the True Story of Travis Walton. And not only, well, like you, I have been out to that location in the Sitgraves National Park with other people. And nothing really quite prepared me for how remote it was. We're talking wilderness here. Now, of course, there's a different view than Travis and his colleagues would have had at that time, because in the intervening years, there was a major forest fire. So you can be at that location now and see 30 miles where you couldn't at that point. But the Sitgraves National Forest is 500,000 acres. It covers parts of 3 contiguous states. You are out there in the middle of nowhere. And when you get to those remaining tree stumps, which are powerful evidence, one of the things that we see, and all of this is documented to beat the band, there's no question about this. The side of the remaining stumps that faced the event area, the tree rings are distorted and 3-4 times as wide as the tree rings on the other side of the tree. Radiation radiation can aggravate growth. Radiation doesn't necessarily kill things. And similar things were seen at Chernobyl some years after the fact, when trees were cut down and they saw that stumps facing the area where the meltdown had happened, that the ring growth was exacerbated, exaggerated. It's one of the most undeniable pieces of UFO related evidence I have ever seen or could have imagined.
It was quite a day, and there are times when you have what I'll call religious experiences without religion.
Theology.
And one of those, just to kind of give you a comparison to maybe emphasize how powerful it was, a place like the Anne Frank house
Yeah.
is a place where it's a religious experience. So
Hmm.
imagine, I really don't know Travis. I mean, I met him. I think the way I met him is that just casually, like I bought his book and I chat him up or whatever. So I really didn't know him, and Jen put us together, and we're there, and it's now, I think it's February, so it's kind of similar conditions that he would have had in November, with a light snow falling, and it's cold, so we got to get out of there, and we're losing daylight, a very short day, so we're getting ready to leave. And without any prompting, Travis starts telling me exactly what happened on that day.
Yeah.
He says, he says, you see that road over there? And it's, kind of hard to see because there's hillocks and whatever. And I nod, yeah. He goes, well, here we were finished the day of work. And he is telling me moment by moment where they're traveling, where the car is, where they're looking, what they're thinking, what the reaction. And I'm thinking, man, I wish I had a recorder here, because no one's going to believe this. And I'm getting chills hearing him tell me this. And all the pictures are done, and we're hitting it off, and he is telling me this. And it was kind of like an Anne Frank house, and I know you can't compare the two, but that kind of honesty and a raw story that you just couldn't pay anybody to tell you. And there was Travis telling me this, which was, it was amazing. And that was the moment that I decided I can't keep this stuff to myself, because Jen eventually used those photographs in her movie.
Yes.
And believe it or not, I get my first movie credit because, thanks for Ray for doing the pictures or whatever. And when I saw it, I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. But it was at that moment I go, I got to write about this, because it's not a really dark thing. There's some really fun things that you can get into and you can learn and you can pass on. And that's how that book came about, is that trip with Travis was the one that put me over the edge.
In your time at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, did you ever meet anyone, encounter anyone who alleged not just knowledge of what you felt was, part of base culture, that this is, a reality here, but who ever claimed to have seen, handled debris, material, or been in Hangar 18?
Let me see if I can parse that for you to make it interesting for your readers. Nobody wants to be that guy that says, I saw this stuff.
Yeah.
And if there is somebody who does say that, check to see, do the sniff test. So I will answer you. I don't even recall anybody even joking about that. That's how bad nobody wants to be that guy. Now, I can tell you that your senator, Goldwater, who wanted to get into the Blue Room, and he had asked General LeMay to get him in, and LeMay's response supposedly was, not only can you not see it, but don't ever ask me that again.
That's right.
I have somebody that I've been close to for almost 50 years and who spent decades in the Foreign Technology Division as an employee tell me that they were there and saw Senator Goldwater walking the halls of FTD.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
And even though he denies that he got in, he was in. And I believe this is the most trustworthy of trustworthy sources. And you know what? It's not a big deal because, many senators have been in. In fact, I just told you our Representative Turner was just in there a few weeks ago. But, people try to blow this up. And, I'm pretty sure that he didn't get into the Blue Room, whatever that is. But there is some basis for his interest. And he actually, my witness, they were told, the senator's in. We don't want him asking you any questions. Close your door. We want him going from point A to point B, and we're going to show him exactly what we want to show him. We do not want you to engage him. And we've told him that, because of his clearance and your clearance differences, that, we basically have to tell him what, we've pre-cleared to tell him. But my source said, oh no, I heard the ruckus. I opened the door and clear as day. And did you see him from the back? No, I saw him from the front. He was coming right at me. So I know that he believes he saw Goldwater walking down the hallway.
While you've been talking, I've been scanning some of these letters, and one from 1981 to Mr. Lee Graham. First, let me tell you, I have long ago given up acquiring access to the so-called Blue Room at Wright-Patterson, as I have had one long string of denials from chief after chief. So I've given up. And in this letter, the subject of UFOs is one that has interested me for some time. About 10 or 12 years ago, I made an effort to find out what was in the building at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base where the information is stored that has been collected by the Air Force, and I was understandably denied that request. It is still classified above top secret, and moving forward from there. It would be very interesting to see it. Well, if it's above top secret, if there's material in his own library, so to say, I would guess it's not accessible to the public. One can only wonder. And on a broader topic, the subject goes back to 1947 at least, and President Truman. I've always felt that after Truman came Eisenhower, of course, who was somebody who was respected and admired by both the military and intelligence community, and that he was probably briefed as solidly as they felt he could be. But from that point on, that every president has been told what the intelligence community wants them to know, which is enough to make them hope to heaven that this thing doesn't blow open in my administration. A difference
Yeah,
between
exactly.
a John Kennedy, who an absolutely legitimate war hero and a person from a very privileged family, after the Bay of Pigs fiasco and his refusing to continue in the invasion of Cuba, he was hated within elements of the military and certainly by the intelligence community. I think he probably learned things more or less on his own because he was so well connected. But from that point on, one can make a deductive reasoning that President Reagan was well briefed, where President Clinton was not. Once again, do you have any thoughts or feelings on that process with presidents?
You mean the process of denying them information?
Well, how each president, is it a uniform thing, or is the way that each president, a new president, is dealt with regarding this subject is kind of tailored to, let's just give them enough information that they will shut up about it and pay attention to other things. And this is just, as far as they're concerned, a ball of wax that they don't want to have to deal with in their lives.
Well, I think there's a lot of pushback from the military when, you say, hey, look, we're giving you all this money and all this weaponry and all these labs and all creating stuff. But we still have this problem. What are you going to do about it? And then the military goes, well, internally, there's really nothing we can do. And we've proven that they're, bigger, faster, stronger, anything. Their technology far outstrips ours. They have capabilities that go through walls and, whatnot. So I think they tell the president, look, this is all speculation, pure speculation. They say, your administration's got really big problems. And we got a war here, a real war. Those other guys with the spaceships, they're not bothering us. And they show up every once in a while, and you got to, invent swamp gas and the planet Venus and, something trickling in your eyeball. So keep that going, and we're going to handle the problems that literally could come, sailing across your sea or marching up, from north or south, cool stuff. I know you're curious, but you need plausible deniability, and
Yes.
you really don't want to know what we know. So I just think that every once in a while, the curiosity trickles to the top and they titillate the people.
Yeah.
And the president is an elected office. He
That's
doesn't have the need to know.
Yeah. Ironic, isn't it true?
Yeah, he has to make big decisions, but on this one, he doesn't have the need to know. So he's not going to know. And it's unfortunate, but this brings me to the AARO report.
Yes.
I really want to touch
Let's
upon
discuss that now, because this is just broken last month, and it's a very important development. And once again, trying to move us back to 1947. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along.
On the 25th of June of 2021, all of us who were wearing the aluminum foil hats took them off and put on a PhD cap and all the things that go with it, because we were the smart ones. We had told you for a long time, and we've gathered the evidence and put it out there and said, nanny, nanny, boo, boo, we told you so. So now, slowly as time goes on, they're reverting back, but they're doing it in, I would say, a highly disingenuous way. And there's tons of things wrong with that report. It's insulting to the intelligence of a 6-year-old. They have taken old reports that have been proven to be fabrications and a pack of lies and use those as the basis for their decisions. So it's just a pile of crap. That's it. But worse, they didn't answer the congressional question. Now, what they did is the congressional question was, and it was one question. We want to know if you have recovered craft and if you're doing anything with them scientifically. That was it. That's all they were asked to respond. And you don't have to even read the report carefully, because what's wrong with the report, it comes out at you and it chokes your common sense. They took it as an opportunity to put out there all the garbage that was already out there, and the good researchers have already proven aren't worth the paper they're written on. So it's all, oh, well, Blue Book had 12,000 cases, only 700 of those. Those 700 cases are not the ones you're looking for. No, in fact, probably several thousand of the 12,000 cases were legitimate, but you decided to say that those 6,000 were solved by putting Blue Book, swamp gas, Venus, a flying sign. I mean, half of those immediately should be pulled out, and they're unexplained. That's what they should. So they did no critical analysis of what BS was already put out there. They regurgitated it, and they overstepped their bounds. They basically said, we're throwing the same crap up there, and we know it's not the answer. It's not even the question we were asked, but we're going to use this as the opportunity to put all of that BS back out there.
One of the subtleties, which I thought, in terms of trying to repress or once again redirect attention, that was clever and kind of a new turn, was the general idea that, look, rather than just say all this is nonsense and that you're misinterpreting natural phenomena and you're hallucinating or seeing swamp gas or what have you, there really does seem to be something mysterious here. And we compliment all of you who have observed or taken the subject seriously, with the rest of us haven't. But even so, we have done a careful analysis with respect to the attention that you have now raised in the House of Representatives. And it's your enthusiasm. You heard X and you heard Y, and you put them together and you misinterpreted. We understand how these things can happen. We laud your efforts to get to the bottom of what does seem to be a genuine mystery, but it really all is explainable in scientific ways, even if they're somewhat unconventional, which I found fabulously insulting. And at the same time, it was, well, let's trot this out here and see if this works. It's better than the crash dummies from 1952, accounting for the aliens in 1947. We really should have thought that one out a little bit better. But, it's still insulting. And, in an existential way, it's kind of funny, but it's not funny at all. Ray, one thing we haven't gotten to here, you worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for 40-odd years. Can you share with us, without violating any understandable agreements and confidences, what your work was about there and some of the responsibilities or projects you were involved in?
Yeah, I think the couple that I'd like to point to, one, because a lot of the work that I did is actually everywhere. And one of the things I did was a executive assignment, which was more fulfilling than the stuff I did engineering. I worked for, it was called the ADA Joint Program Office for several years. And so I was basically assigned here in the laboratory, and I ran contracts that were let in order to produce software that would help the ADA programming language be a success as we try to use it in real-time embedded weapon system computers. So the ADA programming language was developed and designed by the Department of Defense contractors. And then in order for a programming language to work, you have to have software engineering tools like a compiler. And a compiler takes the code, and then the back end of it spits out the operational code that will actually execute on this computer, which could be embedded in a tank, an airplane, maybe, with smaller processors, a laser guided gun. But basically, you now have a singular programming language that you can program all of your weapon system computers in. And that way, if once you're done with a project, you can then go to the next project and still do ADA, because ADA is ADA is ADA, because the front end doesn't change. The back end, the code generators change, but that's not your thing. You're still coding in ADA. Well, it was a solution to the problem that when we did a survey, and I wasn't part of the big team early on, but we did an Air Force survey, and we discovered, like, in one logistics center, 50 programming languages and dialects, and all very contractor specific. So if you had him programming the system, you couldn't get rid of the contractor. You couldn't recompete, because they're the only ones who understood that assembly language level code or whatever it is they were programming it. It might not be a high order language, or 1750A assembly, and that wasn't even standardized. They tried to, but there were all these extensions. Well, to make a long story short, the solution to that problem is develop one high order language, and on the back end, just change the code generators. So my job was to get a contract, which we did, and we had a company, very competent, Boeing, to create a test suite that would analyze certain performance characteristics of these code generators, the compilers, and then we could quickly improve them so that the end user would have something that not only met the standard, which wasn't our part, there was a validation end, we were the evaluation end. So how compact was the code? How quickly did it perform? What kind of error mechanisms were in there? So we're more performance oriented. Because a real-time embedded system, you're flying something on an airplane, you can't put a UNIVAC 1 in there. You're limited on your memory space and things like that. So I worked for the ADA Joint Program Office for 10 years. If you type in my last name and the 3-letter acronym ADA, you will find a handful of reports that I either wrote or my team generated, and that's the public aspect of probably one of the longest projects that I ever worked for.
I see.
And I actually had 4 contractors doing different things like that project. I was the head of what I'll call a think tank, mostly PhDs, and we met every 3 months in different geographic locations. And they were actually like a sounding board for my contractors who might have hit a snag in some of the things they were developing. And I had all these PhD experts that wanted to know what we were doing, because their companies were going to develop software in ADA. So now they're on the ground floor. They know what's going on, and they can quickly transition this technology to their company. So we win, they win, and it was quite an undertaking. I did that for, I think, 7-8 years, but that's public and that's out there. And I'll close with this. Late in life, I am a certified personal trainer, and I had an interest, and we had a 3-star general that wanted to start a program for civilians so we could get all these people up off their asses and into the gyms, and we would give them screenings, blood pressure, blood tests, cholesterol. And so I was doing this for a very small group of about 600. Then the head of AARO asked me to do that, and I was doing it for 2,000. Then the new base commander came in and said, "You're my guy. You're going to come and see me, and you're going to work directly for me at headquarters up here for Wright-Patterson." And then I was in charge of the program for the 15,000 civilians, and wherever I could legally apply it to the military, I had to invite them, because trust me, if you're the head of the military personnel and a civilian says, "By the way, we've got this wellness walk and military are allowed to take duty time to do that," there's a burning hoop of fire, the temperatures you cannot believe. But my base commander said, "You tell them Colonel Spacey, who's now a 2-star general, Colonel Spacey has authorized you. If they have a problem with you, they have a problem with me." And I did that. I was the wellness director for Wright-Patterson late in my career for 2 years, and it was so rewarding. I don't know why I didn't do that my entire life. So, the rest is history. But they let me do it because I was a marathoner, and it was like nobody is a better, senior engineer, executive level, all this, I had Air Force awards and all that. And it was like I was, putting my money where my mouth was.
Yeah.
So I was the ideal executive, basically, to draft for a 2-year agreement to do this. So that's another thing. You can look it up. You can look up my stuff in marathonguide.com and whatever.
Ray, for anybody that wants to follow what you're doing, do you have a website that they can visit?
It's an elementary website. It's my name, Ray Szymanski, at Wix site, because I'm not really out there promoting my stuff.
Yeah.
I probably could. I use my books to say what I wanted to,
Yeah.
and I've done that. I've said that, and once in a while I make an exception and do shows for friends, or do a conference because it sounds interesting.
Well,
but they can go there or my Facebook page.
We are out of time, my friend.
Yes.
A true pleasure. Again, damn that it didn't happen, and proud to work with you again. Looking forward to remaining in close contact. Stay well, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. And I do not feel suicidal. Do not feel suicidal. I want that on the record.
Done.